on social media. So a couple of days after that, Black AF in STEM organized a social media event called #BlackBirders Week. And that's where we really saw all of these movements, just one after the other, for each discipline show up on social media this year. So after that, Sade Davis and Joy Melody Woods started Black in the Ivory, where they, Black scientists and Black professionals in academia shared their stories, talking about microaggressions and all of the obstacles they've had to overcome. And it was very enlightening. And we also saw, because of that event from Amy Cooper and a couple of other socio-political events that were happening in the United States at the time, we actually saw like an increase in folks who wanted to become better allies and, wanting to learn more about the Black experience in America. And so Black in the Ivory was actually really helpful in educating allies or potential allies in the field. So after that, there was #Strike for Black Lives and Shut Down STEM. And that was around the time where the protests really started up here in the US. And then we had Black in Astro, Black Botanists Week, Black Women in STEM Week, and Black in Animal Behavior. And shortly after, Black in Neuro Week.
Which basically started when Angelina, here, let me see if I can, oh, I cannot annotate your screen, but it started basically when Angelina Dukes tweeted this specific tweet, which I don't think she had in mind how big this would get very quickly. It was a very innocent, just so when we're doing this kind of tweet. And I think I remember hopping on this 3 minutes after she posted it. It was very quickly, I think everybody was waiting for something in their own fields. And we've seen these later after Black Neuro, we've seen how quick these things go. Everybody was kind of hoping to start something. And I think after 20, maybe 30 minutes, we already had a couple, maybe 10 or 20 people interested. And not 2 days later, we were having our first meeting. We already had a Slack channel set up, and we started organizing the dates and the events that we would have. I am one of the 6 non-Black allies, and together with the other 17 Black organizers, we started targeting different audiences. We started kind of discussing the scope of this whole week, and we knew more or less what we're good with. We kind of share the same age range and interests in general. So we knew some of us were good in Twitter, some of us were good in Instagram, some of us were good at video editing. So we just started working out that each and every one of us started kind of doing whatever they were good at and helping each other. If you want to go to the next one. And I think it started with the Amy Cooper incident in New York, but the diversity problem in neuroscience is very much real and alive. So this is from a tweet and a lot of these things are happening on Twitter. But this is from a tweet from Say Abiodun, who actually participated in our week. I believe this is an ongoing research, so I'm sure this will be published eventually. But it's kind of hard to see the whole graph, but each of these lines, each of these thin lines represents a different, what's called in the US, an R1 university, so a research intensive university. And each one of these colors represents a ethnicity. Blue represents white people, and the Black lines represent East Asians. And then all the other lines combined, it's even hard to see how much they integrate into this graph. So there's hardly any diversity in science, and this is specifically for psychology and neuroscience. So it's kind of disheartening to see how we've been talking about this for so long and it's still very much a problem in the US. And if you go to the next one, we were talking a little bit before this call about how Brazil doesn't have the same level of statistics. I did find some statistics from CNPq that do show, at least in the biological sciences, so this isn't necessarily specific to neuroscience, but they have, and when we send this, there's a link to this graph and to all their data. But the info that we have very much shows very much the same thing, where majority of white people, and if you think of the distribution of population in Brazil, it's even more wild how this is the case. Brazil is much more diverse, no offense to the US, but we still have a majority of white people in academia, and this is basically all the doctoral, I don't know how to translate my own stuff, but this is all the funding that goes to doctoral students in Brazil. And we still have a very small minority of Black people in here.
So, you know, keeping this diversity problem in mind, we pretty much broke down a week-long event program for Black Neuro Week, thinking about the different themes that we wanted to address to kind of approach this diversity problem. So on the very first day, we wanted to kind of show just how many Black scientists are in the field in neuro-related careers. So we did a Black Neuro roll call that day, and just the amount of responses we had on that day was incredibly overwhelming and quite emotional. I will say, all of us, we were just so pleased to see how many people engaged with us on the very first day.
We were crying the whole week.
Oh yeah, we cried a lot. We were so happy with the turnout just from the very first day, and we did talk a lot about very heavy topics. As you can see on Tuesday, we talked about neuro-racism and just kind of the history of racism in neuro-related fields. So then following that, we wanted to address kind of what the journey to neuro looked like for Black scientists. So we had events and panels around that topic to kind of inspire, you know, future generations and those who are in undergrad or those who are in high school. Then on Thursday, we did Black Mural Art. So that was a day where people who engaged with the week, they were able to send in any pictures of them in the lab or figures, graphs from with their data, maybe neuroimaging photos. And we also had folks who were just artists in their free time. You know, it was a wonderful chance for us to see how multifaceted Black scientists are and can be. We had people submitting videos of them playing the piano, doing poetry. I mean, it was just so beautiful to see Black scientists being comfortable to show themselves 100%. And then we also had an event where we talked to Sade, who Tiago referenced earlier, and she actually is she's a new PhD student, and she's actually looking at the intersection of film and neuroscience. So we got to watch a short film that she directed and wrote. And it was a beautiful film about womanhood, Black womanhood. And she talked a little bit about neuroaesthetics, which is that intersection of, you know, film or visual aesthetics and neuroscience. And it was just so mind-blowing. And a lot of these events we did record, and it's on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in any of this, you can go back and view these events. Following that, we on the Friday talked about mentorship and outreach. So we did Black Neuro Mentors, which was, I think most people already know this, but mentorship is such a huge weapon for underrepresented minorities in academia and in STEM against any bias, like racialized bias that might hold them back. It really takes like a good mentor to make sure that you keep going in your field. And I have found that to be the case myself. So a lot of us, because we knew how important mentorship was, we had an entire day just talking about the importance of mentorship. We were discussing skills, mentorship skills, how white allies who want to interact with the Black population, with Black communities, how they can encourage them to join STEM and interact with them appropriately, because a lot of times, you know, it comes from a good place, and they want to recruit the Black folks in the Black communities into STEM, but they do a poor job of communicating and just like forming a bridge and a connection with these communities. So we talked a lot about that, and we had a lot of participants and registrants for all of these events. So following that, we had a Black Women in Neuro event on Saturday. That also included a roll call for non-binary, trans, and queer folks, just to show how diverse the Black neuroscientists were. And then on Sunday, we did a Black Joy Neuro, because mental health is something that we all struggle with as graduate students and as scientists, because we work in a competitive field. But if you add the racialized experience that Black scientists have in STEM, you know, it further impacts. I mean, studies show, there are so many papers out there that show how much of an impact systemic racism has on Black graduate students and on Black scientists in STEM. So we just wanted a day where we can unpack all of and you know, after a week of unpacking all of the heavy topics, we can just be ourselves and just show pictures and videos of us smiling and doing the things we liked, and talking about our hobbies and talking about mental health resources. So it was a beautiful end to our wonderful week. And then on that Monday, August 3rd, we did an encore. So a lot of people engaged with us during that week, and we were like, okay, now that you know these Black scientists in neuro-related careers are here, hire them, you know, so recruit Black in neuro. You know, we had hashtags for Black neuro faculty, Black neuro postdocs, neuro grad students, and neuro alternative careers. So these were kind of the events that we had. I know that was kind of long, but we had so much engagement and we were so successful. Tiago mentioned it, we cried so much because we had no idea the impact that we would have with just a week-long set of events. So that's kind of like, yeah, Tiago can go into more detail about like what we kind of did to organize these days.
So we mentioned before that we kind of all knew what we were all good in. And that's kind of how this layout or the schedule of events came through. We'll get into the details of like what we think worked best later, but one of the things that still blows my mind is how quick as a team we'd all agree on things. So instead of needing to go through like different committees and like getting people's approval, all of these graphics that you're seeing, all of like our art, even like the hashtags, these were like decisions made in like under 10 minutes. It was just like, is this good? We can change this. And also for the Black Neuro roll call, we were completely blown away by the volume of people that engaged. I think we like peaked at like a couple million people engaging with our tweets, sharing with other people, introducing themselves. We had people from basically every single different field of neuroscience sharing their research. And I think on the whole, we were very excited to how these people were interacting with each other. So for every post, and we were from our Twitter account, we were retweeting all of these. For every account that had, I don't know, I studied neurodevelopment, you'd see like 3 or 4 replies right under that saying, I also study neurodevelopment. Oh my God, what do you, so we don't, there's no way to quantify this, but we're sure that like we introduce people to each other as well, based on their interests, based on their like where they go to school, based on what they do research on. So it's just super exciting to us to get all these people involved because, as we mentioned, individually, each university might have only a few Black students, but here we were very much able to show that if you are organizing a seminar on neurodevelopment, here's a list of 100 Black scholars that you can access to right now. And it was very exciting to us to also show to a lot of these diversity committees that when they say they cannot find someone to give a talk about this or about that, or when they think there's only, sorry, but there's only white people doing that kind of research, we were able to show that no, there's a whole scope of people who are also doing this research. So it was a great start. And this was my baby. I gave the idea of having a whole day, a whole like really heavy but important day talking about neuro-racism. So we had different threads going on Twitter, talking so the history of neuroscience and how problematic some of our own history is as a field. So we talked about eugenics, we talked about phrenology, we talked about how over and over again we try to justify racism by saying they have Black people have different brains, Black people have different skull shapes. And I think it's crucial and so important for us to understand that we come from that history. So a lot of our papers from the beginning of the century, we don't have to go back to the Middle Ages to see this, still have those biases, still have that notion that we need to find racial differences. And we carry that today with MRIs and fMRIs and things like that. And then we also had people talking about their own research, their ways their own research might perpetuate racism. So in my case, I do stem cell research, and it is known that almost every cell line that we use in stem cell research might come from white men. And only now we're realizing that there's differences in stem cell lines and whatnot. And there was people sharing all kinds of different things. And we also had two different events inside that day. One which was a neuro-racism panel. We had specialists talking about AI, talking about genetics, talking about all those branching fields from neuroscience. And then later on, we had an all student-led journal club where we talk about different papers about neuro-racism.
And to add to that, you know, my research, we use EEG pretty heavily. And one of the things I brought up on Twitter, right after the panel and the journal club, was about how EEG systems are not designed to be compatible with natural hair. And so that's spawned a whole bunch of call outs to EEG companies who design these headsets, and a couple of them have actually reached out to Black and Neuro to talk to us, to learn from us, to see how they can do better, which goes to show the impact that these kinds of discussions have and why it's so important to have these discussions.
Then our Black Journey to Neuro had, it was kind of a way to show the different ways or the different paths that you can take from neuroscience. So we had a discussion on how do you get to neuroscience, basically. I think we don't have statistics on that, so I won't say anything conclusive, but I think a good portion of our population was inside grad school at the time. So we also had another panel discussing how do you navigate academia, how do you navigate all of the racialized and heavy discussions that you need to have in academia. And then my favorite one, obviously, I'm kind of biased, but the Beyond the PhD, we had a panel discussing not just the academia or the stereotypical academic route of postdoc professorship. We had people from science policy, which is something that I think it's starting to get some traction in Brazil. And we had people from different industries also talking about their jobs and how they get those jobs. So it was really cool just to have those kind of layers of reaching to undergrads who might be interested in neuroscience, or maybe even younger, reaching to grad students who are deep into the research, because it's very easy to get lost in your own research and get just super focused on the one thing you're doing and forget that you're part of something bigger. And then for people like me who are hopefully about to graduate, it was amazing to see all the different careers that are possible especially after, or especially other than academia.
And then on Thursday, we had Black Mural Art, as I mentioned before, and that's basically a day where we had folks share their favorite pictures of themselves in the lab, microscopy, artwork, data visualization, and they also highlighted their own musical, dance, or other performance art skills, which was really awesome to see. And our main account, we just retweeted everything, and what we saw was immediate engagement with Black and Neuro community members, just connecting and saying, hey, I also play the cello. Hey, I also play the piano. Like, you're an amazing artist, so on and so forth. So it was really great to see. And then we also had an art contest. So what we did was we kept track of those who wanted to enter the contest by using a hashtag, and we selected the winner after the week was over, which was really fun. And then we had a Q&A event, which was my baby. I hosted that with neuroscientist and filmmaker Sade Abiodun, who was an amazing, amazing person to talk to about that intersection of neuroscience and art. So her short film is actually, I think it's available on her website. So if you were to look her up and go onto her website, I think you can access her short film. It was only about 6 minutes long, and it was really beautiful. So I highly recommend it. And then also that talk is still available on our YouTube page. I was able to ask a lot of wonderful questions, and she was just an amazing person to talk to. So that was a fun day. And then Friday, also a day that was really special for me because mentorship has played an important role in my life, and I'm sure in a lot of people's lives. But we did Black Neuro Mentors, but we didn't want to just talk about mentorship. We also wanted to talk about outreach, because you can't really find a mentor unless there are people doing outreach, right? So we had an outreach and mentorship panel where we invited folks from different organizations that are led by other graduate students who may be Black in Neuro or just Black in STEM, who focus on certain populations. So one example is we had a speaker from Muse Mentorship, and she's a Black neuroscientist. Her name is Melise, and she was a wonderful person to give us insight on outreach and mentorship. But that's just an example. Like, she focuses on pairing undergraduates and graduate students with other folks in the neuro field and in STEM field so that they can have a mentor. So that's just an example. And then we also partnered with Skype a Scientist. So if you're not familiar with Skype a Scientist, they're an organization that matches a scientist with a class or a group of students who tend to be in elementary, middle, or high school. And then the students get to ask questions and just interact with the scientists, get to know how they became a scientist or what they research, what they study, what they do. And it was just a really cool experience. So we had 3 different events, one for just elementary school students, one for middle school students, and one for high school students. So that was also a really fun time. I remember some of the elementary school kids asked really cool and funny questions. We know how funny kids can be sometimes. So I believe one of the questions was, why do people call the brain a noodle? Like, so that was really fun.
Then we wanted to show also some of the intersectionality of Black in Neuro. So we chose Saturday to highlight Black women in neuro, but also Black non-binary, Black femmes, and Black trans in neuro. We had an amazing discussion where one of our organizers, Dr. Brielle Ferguson and Dr. Stacey Dutton, talked about that. And we also had we went back a little bit on the history too, because some of the pioneer people in neuroscience were Black women, and we tend to always focus on like Santiago and Cajal and like pretend like other people never existed. And then I did not participate in this, but I remember hearing about how many tears were shed in this social event where we basically like put every Black woman and non-binary folks in a private social, like in a very safe space where they could like talk about their experiences and like their struggles, but also their happiness in being in neuroscience. And I think it's just like a way of showing that you don't have, like these people in Black Neuro do not have to have one identity. They do not have to be the Black person in neuroscience. They can have other identities. They can, like they can navigate different circles. I don't know if you want to talk, you were in the social, right?
Unfortunately, no, I couldn't attend the social, but I am a person with multiple intersections, and I just know that it was really refreshing when we heard after that event kind of just how it went. It was just really refreshing for the attendees and also for the organizers who hosted that social to just kind of decompress and talk about the struggles that they've had with their intersections. I think that oftentimes when you're the only Black person in the room, you kind of represent uh, the entire population of Black people, and like they perceive you to be like this monolith of Blackness, and Blackness is not a monolith. Like, it's very multifaceted. There are Black trans folks who are disabled. There are, you know, Black women. There are Black non-binary folks. There are so many different intersections that, I mean, it's hard to list all of them, right? Because, you know, we're all very diverse, even in just our Blackness. So it was, I know, very refreshing for the attendees of that event to just decompress, be themselves, and talk about the struggles that they've had with their identities and their intersections. So, and yeah, the final day was Black Joy and Neuro, which was just the perfect end to such a heavy week. It just, we wanted something lighthearted, and you know, Black people are suffering in this country a lot and just globally, and we just wanted a day where they could just display their happiness and be themselves. So that was a really, really fun day. And we also had an Instagram live dance class hosted by I think she's a professional in the UK, and I actually participated in that dance class, and it was really fun. And it was just a really great way to decompress from such a stressful but wonderful week. So, yeah.
Then on Monday, kind of like I think this began like halfway across the week. We decided that we needed an extra day. We decided to actually like start materializing some of the discussions we were having. So we started like hashtags about recruiting Black people in neuro. So recruiting PhD students, recruiting postdocs, recruiting professors, industry jobs, because we know that in the end, we live in a capitalist world where your job matters a lot. So uh, one of the ways people in positions of power inside these institutions can make a difference is to basically hire more Black people. You can have a lot of like emails and like nice letters talking about diversity, but in the end, if you do not have that diversity represented inside your institution, very little is going to change. So we just wanted to have something like more material, and we did. And our Slack channel is basically just us posting things that makes us happy. And this day, I remember seeing like a bunch of people were talking to us like, yeah, I think I got a postdoc. I think I got this. I got this position. And it was just amazing to see something like very concrete happening right after all the discussions about mentorship, all the discussions about careers. It was just a concrete way to, I guess, begin the next week, but also end our week.
Yeah, so here are some, you know, stats of our impact on Twitter since July 6th. So this is over 28 days. We had 4.3 million tweet impressions, 67.2 thousand profile visits, which has increased. I've looked at the latest social media analytics, and I don't remember the exact number, but it is much higher now. now we have more than 13.2 thousand followers and 5,600 direct account mentions to the Black and Neuro account. So that was pretty impressive. And like I mentioned before, for the events that we had during that week, we had hundreds of registrants. And when we created the registration forms for those events, we also, collected demographic information just so that we had a better idea of who was engaging with us. And we were just so surprised to see the diverse range of folks who were tuned in. It wasn't just the Black community, but it was also, white people in the field wanting to do better, wanting to learn. And that was really nice to see.
I think just if you want to go back real quick.
Yes.
I just want to point out again that we did all of this in 3 weeks. So it's hard for me now to listen to, and this is inside my own school, but to listen to different committees saying they don't have the time, they don't have the capability of doing anything with a broad audience, or they do not have the energy or anything like that. We reached that many people, and we got back to I don't think we have in this tweet, but we profiled in a good way over 300 scholars in a week. So there's no real excuses anymore to there's not enough time, it takes too much money. All of this was done by a bunch of people who are also trying to get their degrees, who are working full time. So it's just a rant about it can be done, and it was done.
Yeah, I will just echo what Tiago said. After such a tumultuous start of the summer here in the US, we receive, a lot of us in universities receive these really empty statements, blanket statements from the head of the universities talking about how they value diversity and all this other stuff. And for us who have been a part of those university communities, know that that's not necessarily true or reflected in that community. So it did not leave the impact that I think was intended. And what we proved with Black and Neuro Week is that you can do something instead of just saying something, just sending an email out, right? You can actually have impact if you took the time and the effort to do it. Do your homework, do your research, learn what the problem is, and then, have these discussions, and you can really make a difference. So really, universities don't have an excuse anymore. So that's kind of what we wanted to show with our initiative, that there is no excuse to proliferate this diversity problem any longer. So yeah, just wanted to echo that.
So I think some of the lessons, or I don't know, things that we noticed that worked best or that made Black and Neuro be so successful was, first of all, every team member, and I'll speak from an ally point of view here, we all knew exactly what our place was. None of the allies that were in the team were there to steal the spotlight, to make this about themselves, or to make this about allyship. We were very much aware that as non-Black folks, our job was to help as much as we can without being in the front or in the center of this conversation. But we also, everyone knew their strengths, and we didn't for a second question each other's strengths or question ourselves. So if I know I'm good with graphics, instead of being ashamed or embarrassed to say something, I would just go make a graphic before asking for permission. Obviously we would ask people before posting or before sharing anything. But we were in general very much aware of our own capabilities. We're also obviously highly, highly motivated. And when I say goal-driven, it sounds like an entrepreneur, kind of coaching kind of thing, but it's real. We all wanted to make this as successful as possible. No, I don't think any of us wanted to join this to have something on our CVs. We couldn't care less about how this was gonna sound on our CVs or in our professional careers, we were 100% there because we believed in the initiative. We had no extra hoops or bureaucracy to approve anything. Angeline started it all, and she never behaved like a CEO or as a president of Black Neuro. She was always like in every discussion, she was talking to everyone. And also we had as quick as a communication as you could have. If someone tweeted something at us, in 2 minutes, we had a response drafted that was like read by 5 or 6 different people. It helps that we're all like millennials, we're on our phones constantly. We were online 24/7 for the most part, because we also had people in England, we had people in like different countries. We were able to basically have almost like an omnipresence online. We knew exactly how many DMs were coming, who was liking, who was retweeting, who was emailing. And we were able, by doing that, we were able to solve any problems. So we had, and this is an amazing story, but we had someone who pointed out to us that we didn't have any space for disabled people, for Black and disabled people. And then I think in like less than 30 minutes, we had the whole thing solved. The person understood our point of view that we literally just forgot. We gave them a platform to share their thoughts. We highlighted their experiences. So instead of issue a lengthy apology letter, and as Lisa will say, like blanket statements about how we approve of disabled people or something like that, we gave them a platform to have their own voice. And we decided that like in 10 minutes. We didn't have to ask someone else for permission to do that. So I think those 4 things like made everything work so well in general.
Yeah, and I think we all had a good sense of failed initiatives before, or things that don't work or haven't worked in the past, from other sources. So when we were organizing this, we knew exactly what doesn't work, what does work. And so whenever we had any issues, we knew how to address them immediately. And I think that everyone who was a part of this event, like Tiago said, they had no ulterior motive, no other agenda but making a difference. So that really, really, I think, made everything so easy. And like Tiago said, communication was key. There were some times when we were discussing what kind of themes we wanted on each day, and it helped to have different folks with different perspectives to offer in that discussion, so we would know what themes would encompass more of the community that we represent. And so that should be reflected in any group setting, right? We should have folks from different backgrounds and different perspectives, and we shouldn't be afraid to have difficult conversations, because it always starts like ripple effects from difficult conversations always tend to be positive. It always, we can almost always guarantee some kind of positive change if people are willing to learn and are willing to listen. So I think that's kind of what our team dynamic was, and that's how we were able to effectively work together. And with that, we were able to come up with such a wonderful initiative that was successful.
And we have more coming up. We're not allowed to say a lot about all the events or all the initiatives that we want to have, because we're still working on a lot of this. But as you can imagine, like in those 3 weeks that we were organizing Black Neuro, and then afterwards we basically became a cute little family, and it's adorable. And we're still organizing different things. And the next thing that we have going on will be the Black Neuro mini conference. So I'm sure you guys know this, but Society for Neuroscience, which is the biggest neuroscience conference in the world, was canceled this year. So we wanted to have something for the people who wanted to go to that to look forward to and to present their research. We know that like 2020 has been a year, and we wanted to have the opportunity to give the opportunity to people to talk about their research in a more let's say safe and welcoming environment. SFN, if you've ever been, can be terrifying because there's 30,000 people in there. And this is going to be like a really cool, just kind of with the same vibes of like intersectionality and welcoming event. And we're still taking abstracts. We have a team of volunteers actually that are gonna, volunteers from that community that we created that will be reviewing those abstracts. And funny enough, I don't think it's in this graphic, but we're also partnering with Neuromatch Academy, or sorry, Neuromatch Conference and Neuromatch Academy to kind of have like an overlapping, a few overlapping events. And Neuromatch Academy was itself another initiative that started from Twitter that was amazingly successful. So yeah, all these links are going to be are online already. So if you want to sign up and send your abstracts. And I think that's all we had.
Yeah. So if there are any questions, let us know.
Thank you, Lizel, and thank you, Tiago. Great talk, and it's very good to hear from you and see and up close your initiative. I have actually 2 questions just to kickstart. First one is easy. Why do people call the brain a noodle? I don't know.
I wasn't there.
So I listened to that, and I can't exactly remember that particular scientist's response, but I just remember when I heard that question, I myself, as a PhD student, I was like, wow, why do they call it a noodle? That is a fantastic question. Honestly, kids ask the questions that we're all thinking.
Right. Yeah, well, it's kids always come up with the funnier things that you can possibly think of. The idea of a naive brain without boundaries and constraints is fantastic. From our point of view, so I'm looking at this and I'm seeing, and I'm seeing this in Brazil, and I'm seeing this all over the place, which is lack of diversity. And I guess my question is, because I've seen and I follow people trying to do, for instance, increasing the presence of women in science and failing, increasing diversity and failing many times. Recently, as part of this private foundation that was trying to fund Brazilian scientists, and they had a goal in mind to have a certain percentage of minorities, and they failed. So what can we do? Like, what kind of practical measures can we take in order to increase diversity? Other than working at the base, meaning, for instance, education, basic education, and trying to bring up people on equal grounds, so we don't have such a disproportional representation when we get to PhD students, for instance.
I don't know if Tiago has any concrete suggestions, but one thing that does come to mind for me is being very action-oriented in your inclusion, and in doing so, improving your retention efforts. There we go. That's the word. So one thing that I think we can do to fix the leaky pipeline is to improve the environment in which these diverse scientists would end up in. So you start there, right? So inclusion means, and I actually heard this from just yesterday, I heard this analogy. Diversity is being invited to the dance, and inclusion is being asked to dance. So the difference there is that when you're invited to the dance and no one's dancing with you, you don't want to be at the dance. And I think that's the big issue with science in general. You provide the resources, you want to increase the diversity, and you're funding these scientists to get to that point, and then they get to that point in their career and no one is asking them to dance. I don't mean literally, but no one is including them in collaborations. No one is really interacting with them in a safe, they don't create a safe environment for these diverse scientists. I think that STEM has like this culture that is ultimately exclusive, and it feels exclusive to the diverse scientists that end up in it. And I think that you need that education for, you know, folks on the other side who are in those positions so that they can learn how to become more inclusive, learn how to welcome these kinds of scientists in their space, and how to be better with their inclusivity. And once you improve that inclusivity, you'll find that more and more diverse scientists will feel comfortable pursuing these careers, because we don't want to end up in a space where we don't feel welcome or included. So I think that's the big issue. You can throw out as many funds and grants and resources as possible to get them to that point, but if you don't retain them, that's the issue. So I think those are the concrete things that can be done, you know, education and improving your inclusivity. And your retention efforts. So that's something concrete that I can think of.
And I'll speak this even though I'm in the US right now, but from the little I know of academic life in Brazil, it's like, it's an issue in the US, but it's heightened in Brazil. It's, you can have, in the US, we're celebrating over and over again how we have more women than men starting a grad school, studying med school. My program has a pretty diverse pool of PhD students, and it is 2020, and my department, who's been around probably since the 1800s, just had their first full woman professor, first in 2020. So yes, we're having a whole lot more students coming in, and what is happening between having that student train, even if we get them to a PhD level, even if we get them graduated, why aren't they making to a professorship? Why aren't they not making to a department head? So there's a thing, I don't know if this translates well to English, but o teste do pescoço, which is like, look around you, like see who are in these positions of power, who are your department chairs, who are your CEOs, your who's reitores, which I don't know if it's translatable as well. Who are these people? Who is taking the decisions of hiring? So yes, we can like get grants to get people interested in science. Yes, we could go back to basic education, but who are the people on the top making the decisions? Are they really diverse, or is that like a group of 20 white men, which are all in their 80s, making decisions about 20-year-old something diverse populations? So that's really the key here, because you can have as many people as you want like applying to these jobs, and you can have like the initial seed grants and things like that, but none of these people are making it through. They're not getting where they need to be, and that reflects in every level. So I said that somewhere else, I forgot where, but hire more Black people in those positions of power and see how much that changes. So a lot of times it's not even like conscious, but if you have a leadership board that's comprised of all men, they'll never think about a woman's problem. They'll never think about outside their box. So yeah, it's everything that Lisa said, but also like just hire more people.
More people.
I'd also like to add, you know, I did mention that I am in an engineering department doing neuromechanics research. So the engineering department is comprised of maybe 3 or 4 women, but it's 20 men. And so interestingly enough, the faculty actually hosted a diversity training, you know, a sensitivity training from the Title IX office, and Title IX has to deal with, it's about sexual harassment and so on and so forth. And it's a huge issue in male-dominated departments, so that's why they had this training. And interestingly, the person leading the training talking about sexual harassment was a white man. And you know, is he necessarily the expert to talk about that? So if you're going to host these kinds of trainings, you know, there are folks who are subject matter experts. Not only are they expertly trained in these fields, talking about diversity, talking about sexual harassment, gender issues, but make sure that, someone who actually can understand these experiences from their own identity, they're the best educators of that experience. So needless to say, that particular training I bring up was not very successful in educating the male faculty about sensitivity in gender issues. So yeah, and then it's funnily enough, we checked in with another department, the biological sciences department, that hosted a same training, but theirs was better, and they learned a lot more because it was hosted by a woman of color who actually comes from a sociology department, and this is what she does. So she could speak from her experiences, but also from her knowledge base in her field. So I think it's very important that if you do have any kinds of trainings, that they're hosted by the right people. Like Tiago said, who's talking about this? Who's making the decisions about diversity? Are they necessarily the right people for that job? So.
Exactly. Any more questions?
I do.
All right. Professor Eduardo, please.
Yeah, so I kind of have a comment, and I don't know if it's a question, but let's see how it goes. So, of course, Black Neuro is not solving all the problems, right? But I think one of the biggest achievements that you're getting to is to generate a feeling of belonging, right? Because all the Black in neuroscience can be a lot spread physically, right? And then you have, they usually are in these labs full of white people, and they have problems. Of course, it's not the same thing for them, like to being evaluated by white people or to be hired in this by these committees of white people, right? But at the same time, now you have a feeling of community, because now you know that you exist, right? If you look back to that graph that Tiago showed of the diversity in the neuroscience schools, all these people, so all those Black people in all those schools, they are spread around, right? And you didn't have, and probably most of them didn't have contact to each other before this initiative, right? And it's super cool what you did. And yeah, Tiago, we have to do to create the Black Neuro Brazil in Portuguese. We really have to connect all these people, It's a very interesting initiative.
Having that community has made a world of a difference. So just speaking from experience, I was having some difficulties myself because I work in a department that's predominantly white, and I'm the only Black person in my lab. My lab is actually pretty diverse, but in terms of Blackness, I'm the only one there. And it can be difficult, and just having that community to fall back on, it's actually regenerated my passion and my interest for neuro, and I'm in a much better place in terms of how I feel about my research and my career, because I have people to talk to now that I've connected with that community. So having a community aside from mentorship is just so important, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because we did find that after we concluded Black and Neuro Week.
And this is obvious nowadays, but representation matters so much. Imagine what would happen if instead of, this is a tangent, but imagine if Nicole Ellis was a Black woman in neuroscience, being like possibly like the biggest neuroscience that Brazil ever created. Imagine if all of our idols in science in Brazil were more like as diverse as Brazil is. If we had indigenous people in science, if we had like representations from all the states in neuroscience, not just Sao Paulo and Rio. A lot of these people don't even know neuroscience is. A lot of, like, I don't know, a kid in a small town somewhere in the northeast of Brazil might not know the neuroscience is a possibility to them, but they're curious about the brain. They love the brain. Just having someone that looks like you, and this comes from someone who moved to a country that does not look like me, even though I'm white. Just having someone that you can look up to, someone that looks like you, that is in that position of power, and like who's leading a university. So imagine if someone who just started their undergrad, their graduação, sees a Black person who's leading the whole university or who's leading a whole department of neuroscience. I think just having that person there makes so much difference, makes the world of a difference. And that's something that we were also able kind of to do, to show like, look, there's professors in all fields of neuroscience. There's department chairs in all these fields. Just having that person existing is a lot. It's very powerful already.
No doubt. I think having representatives essentially is a way of empowering people, making them feel belonging to a certain thing. I have a question here on YouTube for you guys. It's not necessarily related to your topics, but do you have any suggestions for activists demanding their institutions to take real action? That's the question.
What I did after Black Neuro ended, I emailed the few people I know in my diversity committees. I never got a reply, but I emailed them bragging about Black Neuro, like, look at all that could be done. Because, and I am in my committee, in my university's committee for diversity, and I try my best, but there are institutional policies that like kind of hold us back. The fact that so after George Floyd was murdered, it took my university over a week to issue any kind of statement. And if you remember, that was May 29, I think. The country here was on fire, and we had protests literally in every state. We had protests in Brazil in solidarity. We had protests in UK, and it took us a week to issue a name and like blanket email saying we support Black Lives Matter. That is probably because one person wrote the email who had to ask their boss, who had to ask someone else's boss, who had to like correct the language, make sure we're not offending anyone. So what I did was email them, Black Neuro, and say like, look, this can be done much quicker and much more like productive. You can showcase successful stories and like basically not force them, but almost like shame them into action. I don't know how much that works because I never got any replies, but they like at one point these committees have got to realize that they're not doing any good. Like they're not necessarily like achieving the goals that they want to achieve.
And I will add for any activists who want to affect change a lot quicker and stuff, I would say it all stems from doing your own homework and educating yourself. Because one thing that I have seen with folks who are activists in this kind of movement, they tend to turn to the underrepresented groups that they are trying to advocate for education. And that puts the burden on minorities constantly to educate their peers and telling them what they can do. And the thing is, we have been telling folks what they can do for a very long time. There's a lot of literature out there. There are a lot of books, a lot of podcasts, a lot of documentaries that you can turn to for your self-education. And I think that once you open your mind and your hearts to that information, I think you already would know what to do to make a difference, like in your own community. So I think it starts from taking the time and the effort to learn on your own. And if you open up your mind and your heart, I think you'll find what you can do in your respective communities to make a difference, because we can't tell you what you can do, because we don't know what your community looks like. We don't know what resources you have, what kind of privilege that you may have to affect that kind of change, but only you know that. And then another thing I would suggest is use your privilege for good. So if you know that you're in a position of power to make change happen, if you know that because of the way you look and the way that you're presented in society provides you with an extra level of privilege and resources, use that to advocate for the voices that have been speaking on these issues for a very long time. So I'll even give you a personal example. So I am a light-skinned Black woman. I know that I don't experience the same kind of oppression that my other folks in the Black community do experience because of the color of their skin being darker than mine. So instead of me, spearheading the activism for them and my voice being the primary voice about their issues, I tend to use my voice to get other people to stop talking and to listen. And then I move and shift the focus to their voices, because it's them who should be speaking on their issues, right? So if you find yourself in a position where you can get people to listen, make sure that you also shift the focus to the voices that already exist. It's one thing to be an advocate for and be an activist, but make sure that you're not monopolizing that movement and making yourself the face of that movement. So that's also really important.
Perfect. Any more questions?
I just want to congratulate you guys. It was amazing to hear it. It's really, really inspiring. We have our WhatsApp groups of students. Everybody is cheering. They are loving it. And I just want to make a quick comment, actually, because I don't really think we are failing when we are trying to achieve more diversity. I just understand that there is just so much work to be done that we need everyone that can help to do every little bit, to share the news, to invite people to talk, to listen. And well, I just want to congratulate you guys in the name of me and my friends that are all really excited to hear you guys.
Thank you. And you bring up
Yeah.
a really good point. Like, it takes everybody, it takes a village to make a difference. So thank you for saying that.
And these issues are systemic, so we're not going to fix racism if we don't fix the economic status before this. Like, no one's going to go into a doctoral degree if they do not have food at home. All of these things are much, much bigger than just science. So yeah, we can do all that we can inside our own fields and inside our own communities, but these are huge, huge issues. And yeah, it's going to take everyone.
Yeah, actually, I learned this. I did not know. Our university has a program. It's an internship program that they run every year. It's fairly large, relatively to the size of the university, and they have a priority ranking based on ethnicity, diversity, and economics. So there is a preoccupation, meaning, for instance, they are concerned with the idea not only we need to bring people to the university, but we need to keep them here. Meaning, for instance, we need to provide them with some sort of financial support so they can go through their graduation and their undergrad, actually, sorry, their undergrad programs without dropping out. So I think that is a very important type of measure that has a very practical way of helping, increase diversity, and not only increase diversity, but provide the means for once the students get in to stay in the university and be successful in their academic career. Just a comment. I like comments.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. You know, I can't speak to Brazil as a country, but in the US, the socioeconomic status of a lot of minority communities really impacts their ability to go into higher education. So just providing that kind of resource makes a world of a difference in retaining those minorities in higher education. So that is a very great point. And I would say, you know, it's interesting because a lot of folks are very hesitant to provide those kinds of opportunities and diversity grants and scholarships and stuff because a lot of the other students who are not a part of minority groups, they tend to look down upon those who get into college or certain graduate programs because of some kind of diversity grant or scholarship, which is interesting because those students tend to have that you know, they don't realize that the process of getting there is very unequitable. You know, they may have been provided with a socioeconomic status that they were born into and other resources to get them to that point where others, minority students, don't have that access that they do. And it's so interesting that, you know, as a graduate student who got a full fellowship for grad school, it kind of is disheartening to hear from your peers, oh, well, you only got that because you're a minority, you're a Black woman, you know, and it's like, no, I got it because I need it, because I wouldn't have been able to be here without it. And I'm here because of my worth and my merit. But yeah, these kinds of resources are so important in keeping us, you know, on track. So thank you for bringing that up. That was a good comment. And a lot of universities nowadays, I will say, have these kinds of grants and scholarships available. I would just encourage students who are not part of minority groups to avoid looking down on students who get into college on those scholarships and grants because they need it. And, you know, they weren't born into the same socioeconomic status that you may have been born into to get to college, so.
Yeah, one simple way of solving that problem is not making that kind of information public, right? So in the moment that you don't make it public, you kind of take that attempted to take away the power from minorities, away from the dominant groups. So I think that's an important way. Well,
that's a complex issue though, because I will give a concrete example. With MIT, for instance, they actually have a large population of women compared to men in their demographics, which is fantastic, right?
Undergrads?
Yeah, undergrads, which is fantastic. It's amazing. And they make these statistics available. And I think it's important to have these statistics available because it shows that what they're doing it right? However, it's interesting because there are parents who want their sons to get into MIT and they say, oh, well, it's super competitive and my son will never be able to get into MIT because they only want to recruit women. And now it's unfair for my son. And I'm like, oh no, it's been unfair for so many people's daughters for so long. So I don't think you have room to complain, but I think having some of that information public is important. It shows us that there are things that you can do to improve the diversity in your institution. But yeah, it's complex. It's like, what information should you share? You know?
Yeah, no, Liz, what I meant when I said don't share that information is the information, for instance, of the fellowships that are granted into a certain condition. But yeah, you're right. But MIT also failed to, like, they tried really hard to improve the number of women faculty. And they failed. They could not do it. Like, again, maybe Juliana is right in the sense that maybe they didn't fail. It was an attempt, and there are corrections that need to be made in order to actually achieve the goal, which is kind of super interesting because in certain fields in Brazil, for instance, we don't have that problem. So in some ways, we solved that problem. However, on positions of power, we still kind of not there. So I think it's we're here for the long battle, meaning we're at the beginning, and we need to keep working on it and trying to improve and trying to get better not only as an academic institution, but as a society in general, we need to improve and we need to get better. So I would like to say, if nobody has any more questions, I would like to thank you guys so much. Again, thank you for the students for, inviting you guys. Thank you guys for agreeing. It was fantastic. This is the second lecture that we have on the topic. Even though this is a neuroscience, we usually do hard science on our seminars. We have been trying to open up and do more things like this, and I really appreciate your time. And I want to congratulate you guys on your initiative. Thiago, I think you need to bring it back, neuro in science, to Brazil, and get it going and spread the word.
Will do.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks
It was
again.
wonderful. Bye.